well as startup entrepreneurs and venture capitalists who are looking to play in the innovation ecosystem in Indonesia.
This is very exciting. I really love to see a lot of people gathering and the thirst of how to break barriers in growing innovation inside the company. Really, really exciting.
Good morning, everyone. Oh, nice and bright and cheerful morning. So, as I was introduced as Indranil, I just want to say that I get to hear my full name only when I'm in trouble with my wife. So please call me Indro. That's how all my friends and colleagues know me. And every time I come to Indonesia, and the first time I came to Indonesia was about 20 years ago, and everybody thought I was Indonesian. Everybody. And when I said to my client that I am not Indonesian and I do not understand Bahasa, they actually thought I was lying to them. So I don't know. There is some Indonesian blood somewhere in my ancestry. But I am originally from India. And Indro, or Indranil, is actually a quite common name from the part of India that I come from. And I was told that Indra is quite a common name in Indonesia as well. So it's quite interesting. Let me just start by talking a little bit about why I'm here and the journey that I've taken to be where I am. So I started my career as an engineer. Don't hold it against me. I see a lot of manufacturing people in the room. So that was my initial foray into education, was robotics and manufacturing engineering. So this was in the early 90s back in India. And I quickly realized that there weren't too many robotics jobs available in India at that time. So I actually moved into different areas. So I've done strategy work, M&A work, consulting work. And then I came to the conclusion that as you all know, most of the best laid strategies and intentions are often not implemented primarily because of inaction from the top. So I became quite interested in the dynamics of the boardroom and the management team. And I realized that I needed to understand psychology, human psychology and organization psychology, to be able to deal with that. So I am self-taught in psychology. I don't have a degree to show for it. But trust me, I've gone through more assessments than any of you have in this room. So that's the path that I took. So my career journey is a combination of technology and psychology. And to a large extent, what I'm going to talk about today is informed by that journey that I have taken. So do you know who this is? Okay. So this is William Gibson. He's called the Noir Prophet because he writes very dark science fiction novels. If you haven't read him, I really, really recommend that you do. It's fun reading. But the reason why I bring up William Gibson today is because there is a quote that is one of my favorites that is attributed to him. And the quote goes something like this. He said, "The future is already here. It's just not very evenly distributed." And this is one of my favorite quotes, because as you think about corporate innovation, very often you are trying to figure out what the future is going to look like for your industry, for your company, and trying to invent the future. But everything that I'm going to talk to you about today and what I'm seeing with my clients tells me that that is the wrong problem to solve. Now, if you go back, I don't know, 50, 60 years, where was the innovation in the world coming from? Go back 60 years, say. Most of the innovation in the world was coming from government, from security services, from armed forces, from government-funded universities, from government-funded programs. And then we had about 3 or 4 decades in which large organizations and large corporations took over the mantle of innovation. So that's where you have organizations like IBM inventing things. You have organizations like GE, like Sony in Japan, large organizations like Xerox. And by the way, a lot of the things that actually Apple put into the market were invented by Xerox several moons ago. So there was a transition from the seat of innovation being governments and government-funded programs to large organizations and R&D centers. But what has happened since about the year 2000 is in the last 18, 20 years, we have seen a shift that a lot of the innovation has moved, the seat of innovation has moved from R&D centers of large corporates to startups. And that has been fueled by venture capital money. That has been fueled by successes of startups scaling up and getting to the levels of a Google or a Facebook over the last decade or so. And this is a relatively new phenomenon. And what we are seeing right now is that corporate innovation is now going yet another shift. And that shift is moving away from pure startup-led innovation to what we call ecosystem innovation, which is basically large companies like most of you, about half of you, and the startup ecosystem coming together and innovating and working on ideas together. Because as I said, if you believe William Gibson, the future has already been invented. It's all around you. It's not about inventing new things. Corporate innovation, to me, is not about inventing new things. It is about understanding that you are sitting right in the center of all this innovation. You've got startups around you, you've got universities around you, you've got VCs around you, you've got research labs and accelerators. So over the last 5 years or so, Singapore, where I'm based, there has probably been a research lab that has come up or an innovation lab that has come up almost every single week. So these labs are often open for collaboration. All you need to do is to walk in and say, hey, I have an idea, I have a problem statement, can we work together? Universities are the same way. Startups, more often than not, are the same way. VCs are absolutely phenomenal human beings to work with because they're interested in solving problems. So you can just chat with a VC over a cup of coffee and say, why don't we work together? So my friends, if you are sitting in a large organization and you are thinking about where and how big ideas and the future of your company, your industry is going to come from, don't look inside. The big ideas are outside. I was with a banking CEO the other day, about 2 weeks back, and he was making the point that I'm not going to be disrupted by another bank. That's not going to happen. I'm not worried about that. In the longer term, I'm not worried about that. I'm going to be disrupted by maybe a technology company, a platform company, maybe a data company. So a lot of what your future is going to look like lies outside, and it's all around you. All you need to do is to figure out how to harness it. And I'm going to spend the rest of my talk today focused not on how do you build more invention inside your company, how do you build more creativity inside your company. But I'm going to talk about the fact that we believe corporate innovation is not a creativity challenge. It is a political challenge. So let me repeat that. It is not a creativity challenge. It is a political challenge. And I will explain to you why we believe that is so, and why a lot of the focus today that you are putting on making your employees more creative, generating more ideas, maybe doing some hackathons, giving awards for innovation to employees, a lot of that is good money, but it's spent on solving the wrong problem. Why do I say that corporate innovation is a political challenge? There is something called Moore's Law. Anybody familiar with Moore's Law? So Moore's Law basically says that technology moves at an exponential pace. And it has been proven to be true. You look at all the data points. Exponential pace is what technology moves at. But there is another law called Martek's law, which I find quite fascinating, which says technology moves at an exponential pace. Organizations change at a logarithmic pace. Especially large organizations change at a much slower pace than what technology is going. And by the way, do consumers move at an exponential pace or a logarithmic pace? Actually, consumers move at an exponential pace. Consumers are keeping much faster pace with technology than organizations are. Recently, there was Singles Day in China. And I was looking at those numbers and I was going, what is going on here? Do you know that they transacted more than $1 billion on the Alibaba platform in the first 40 seconds of Singles Day? In the first 40 seconds. How long does it take your company to transact $1 billion? Now, these people who were buying things like crazy on Singles Day, the total amount, I think, was around $40 billion. It was a new record. Now, those people don't have to be taught to adapt to the new technology of e-commerce and, buying things on your phone, et cetera, et cetera. So consumers actually adapt very quickly. My grandmother is on Facebook. It's a disaster, but that's a different story. She is on Facebook. Now, her ability to understand English, to understand technology, to know how to use the iPad is fairly limited. But it was all of 10 minutes of time that she spent with my son, and she's now on Facebook. And she's sending me good morning messages every day. But that's how quickly consumers adapt to technology. So technology and consumers are moving at an exponential pace. From a corporate innovation standpoint, if you want to say that I will come up with the next new technology, or I will come up with the next new consumer product, you are wasting your time. Unless you have the resources of a Google or Alibaba, you are wasting your time. Where you need to focus your attention is how do you get your organization to move faster to match up with this possibility-reality gap. That's why I say it's not a creative problem, it's a political problem. Because your organization, there is a reason why your organization moves at the glacial, slow pace. And I'm going to talk about that for the rest of my talk. Because this is the problem that you are probably ignoring at the moment. This is the problem that you need to take on. Some of you know what I'm saying intuitively, but you haven't taken it on because you think it's too hard. And I see some heads nodding. But if you don't solve for it, you are not going to solve this problem of clock speed. So I have two numbers up there. One is 47 days, the other is 16 seconds. So 47 days is the time that it takes one of the best banks in the world, one of the topmost banks in the world, known for its innovation, known for its digital transformation program, to launch a new product or service. And they're very proud of that number because they brought it down from 4 or 5 months to about 47 days. That's the time it takes them to launch a new product or service. Amazon launches a new product or service every 16 seconds. So when you're thinking about innovation, think about speed. Not about inventing new things, but about speed. How do you get the organization to work at a clock speed of 16 seconds and not 47 days is the big issue that you're in front of. And that requires not innovation of product and service, it requires innovation around the institution, how your organization works or doesn't. But if you're able to beat Martek's law, if your organization can become faster, more nimble, more agile, amazing things can happen. And these are some examples of companies like Unilever, Bosch, Michelin, traditional companies, I mean, these companies have been around for a long time, that are actually working at this problem. And I include Deloitte in there. I run a program called The Future of Work within Deloitte, and when we started the program, our expectation was that we would get our money back in 3 years. Typical IRR calculation, right? So you get your investment back in 3 years. That was the expectation. So we are 15 months, 16 months into the program right now, and our current run rate is 30x, 30 times return on investment. We would not have been able to conceive even in our wildest dreams that such outcomes were possible. But these outcomes are possible not because we have geniuses working on the team, other than me, of course. It's not because we have some magical potion that we have or some new technology that we have come up with. All we have done is that we have set up Future to Work on the principles of a startup organization. Everybody within the team operates as if they are working in a startup organization. And it is difficult to solve for, but if you solve it, the outcomes are absolutely fascinating. I get surprised myself every day with what my team is able to achieve. And I'm a pretty aspirational person. I have big ideas, big dreams. I believe that I set stretch goals. The stretch goals that I set are low bars for the team. They jump over it every day. And I'm inspired by them. And I'm here to tell you that if you work at this problem systematically, if you work at this problem with a mind of a scientist, not emotionally, this political issue of why your organization does what it does and stops innovation in its tracks every day, you can solve for it. And I'm here to give you some initial ideas and thoughts about how to go about it. So, the equation is fairly straightforward. You need to work on three things. You need to think about the structure and the design of the organization that is going to do innovation in your company. Number two, you need to think about the leaders and their behaviors and their mindset. Not so much their domain knowledge. They don't need to be superb technology geniuses. They don't need to come from 100 years background in R&D and innovation, but their mindset, how they think about problems, how they think about people, how they think about decision making. Work on that. And number three is the workforce. The team, the people, the talent within the team. Now, today morning, I thought, maybe I'll share two of these with you. One is around the organization, and the other is around leaders, you and me, people like us who are given the job of moving the organization forward on its innovation agenda. On the workforce, perhaps another time we can talk about that. But that's an easier one to solve. If you've solved for the organization, if you've solved for leadership, the workforce rules are fairly straightforward. That is what is going to give you readiness for the future. That's what is going to give you the ability to harness all of the invention and all of the ideas, all of the innovation that is all around you, and be able to help you monetize that and make it effective at an operational level for your company. So let me start with the organization. We use the term edge organizations to define the kind of organization that you need to be able to drive innovation inside your company. And I will explain to you why we use the term edge organization. All of you understand what is your immune system? Everybody has an immune system, right? What does your immune system do to your body? Sorry? Protect, yes. It protects your body from falling ill, being affected by a virus or a bacteria or whatever it is, right? So your immune system helps you continue living. Your immune system attacks the things that are bad for you. Do you believe that your organization has an immune system? Well, I'm here to tell you that it does. And that immune system in the organization is basically designed to protect the company from bad decisions, so from poor use of money, from poor judgment, and from going bankrupt because of those. And that immune system is represented often by the finance function, the legal function, the compliance function, even within the business units, business leaders, etc., they all represent the immune system. People like you and me are also part of that immune system. So when we see a large company make a proclamation that, oh, from tomorrow we are going to become this innovative company, we are going to operate like a startup, we are going to think like a startup, etc., etc., I have only one question to ask to that company. The typical success rate of startups, less than 8%. The shareholders are giving you money. Is that the risk expectation of the shareholder, that there is about a 92% chance I'm never going to see my money back? I don't know about you, but my shareholders do not have that risk expectation. So if you're taking money from shareholders with a certain risk-return expectation and putting it across the organization, you're trying to build an entire organization that is going to work with that kind of risk-return mindset, it just doesn't work. And what happens is, immediately the immune system steps in. Once you've launched your big innovation campaign, the immune system comes and says, really? You need $20 million to build a prototype? Where is that money going to come from? You need 8 months to, go without revenues, pre-revenue? How are we going to sustain ourselves? You need so many resources to go out and do an experiment that could fail. Where are those resources going to come from? We have other things to do. And that is precisely the reason why corporate innovation is a political challenge. So my advice to most of these large organizations is, don't attack the immune system. Don't take on the immune system. It's not worth it. It is designed to protect the company. And it will consider innovation and new ways of doing things part of the bacteria and the virus that is attacking the company. It will not differentiate. And that's why most innovation efforts fail. So what is the alternative? So on the one hand, you have large organizations that are very rigid, slow, siloed, hierarchical, and rigid by design. And then you have startup organizations that are very fluid, that have about an 8% chance of survival. It is very difficult to jump from one to the other, as I just explained. So that is why you need a bridge to connect the two. And that is what we call the edge organization. An organization that is set up with some characteristics of a startup, but is linked to the mothership with certain expectations, which I'm going to explain in a minute, and lives somewhere between. That's why the word edge. Somewhere between the current organization of the mothership and the startup ecosystem. So it's able to work with the startup ecosystem, is able to innovate, etc., but also follows some of the rules that are laid down by the mothership. So this is what an edge organization looks like. Now, this is not a new idea, by the way. So for the last about 15 years or so, a lot of large companies have set up a separate entity, often called XYZ Ventures. Johnson & Johnson Ventures, Intel has Intel Capital, Citibank has Citi Ventures, etc., etc. So this is not a completely new idea. What is new about it is that most of these venture organizations are set up completely distinct from the mothership. There is very little connective tissue between the two. And they are set up primarily with one objective, which is to drive new growth, the top objective. But edge organizations, as we define it, have dual purpose. One is to drive new growth, yes, but the other is, over time, to help shift the culture and ways of working of the mothership over time. Now, that is very important as you set up your edge organization, to keep in mind that it is a dual objective play. The mothership provides strategy, or at least some elements of strategy. Strategic themes is what we call it. Investment, provides some sponsors and key talent. The edge organization brings with it a completely new structure, new ways of managing performance. KPIs are shifted to OKRs, for instance. New ways of working, new ways of learning. And as the edge organization grows, it begins to influence the mothership in terms of how things happen. And once you can design the edge organization and set it up just adjacent to your business units, that is when you're going to start to solve the political problem of corporate innovation. This is what an actual edge organization in one of my clients looks like. So they break it down into tribes. So tribes are about teams of about 100 people, 150 people. So typically each tribe is looking at a particular customer segment. So it could be small and medium enterprises. Another tribe could be looking at millennials, etc. And within that tribe, they have squads. The squads, or the vertical boxes, are basically cross-functional teams. These are teams of 7, 8, 10 people. And those teams are made up of people from engineering, from marketing, from analytics, technology, digital, even some finance and legal people who might be appropriate for setting up a particular offering. Those squads actually work like startups. So you see, what I'm trying to say here is that you're incubating the startup culture within a squad, but by using the tribe and connecting those tribes back to the mothership, you are building that connective tissue between the two. So in a nutshell, that is how it works. So we started on this journey with a number of our clients, and we set up this organization design. They liked it. It started going well. But all of our research was saying that, wait, something is wrong. Because every time they were putting a leader from inside the mothership, from somebody who comes from the mothership, to run one of these tribes or some of these squads, it was failing. And it was only working when they had people coming from outside the company to run it. But if there were people coming from outside the company to run it, they did not get the sponsorship of the mothership as much as they would like to. So over time, they were losing the political battle, and this was falling apart. So that is when we started working on this notion of leadership. And what does it need for a leader, people like you, to be able to operate in this edge organization? How can you lead corporate innovation differently? What is the distinction between a corporate executive and the leader of a tribe or a squad in an edge organization? And as we started thinking about it, it became clear to us that it was primarily in the mindset, not in the skill set, that the distinction was. So we started using this term, leaders as founders. Leaders who think with a founder's mindset. They may not have started up their own company. It's not a prerequisite. But you can build a founder's mindset. You can teach yourself over time to think, act, and react like a founder. So we started putting together the basic principles of what this founder's mindset would look like. And I'm here to share with you the top 3 or 4 ideas from that body of work. And we are working with Indonesian companies right now, state-owned enterprises, large banks, large telcos, conglomerates, on this notion of leaders as founders. And what I find fascinating is as follows. The best corporate leaders, the corporate leaders who are most respected in the company, in a large company, are not necessarily the best when it comes to the founder's mindset. And that's okay. So the idea of who should lead some of these tribes and squads is not a simple matter of who is the most respected or who has the highest performance numbers, best KPIs. It is a different mindset. And for your organization to understand that you don't have to be brilliant at being a corporate executive to be brilliant at being a corporate founder is very, very important. Otherwise, what happens is you say, okay, so my best performers will naturally be the best founders, so you put them there. And the chances of failure are pretty high. So I'm going to talk about 4 things that are distinctive about the founder's mindset. And I'm going to use examples. And some of these examples are from my personal life, like my role and the ecosystem that I deal with, the political challenges that I grapple with every day. Trust me, I do. So some of those are from that, and some of those are from our clients and how they're grappling with this notion of leaders as founders. So I'm going to talk about 4 shifts that you're going to see. If you move from a corporate executive role to a corporate founder role, there are 4 shifts that you're going to see. Number 1 is outcome trumps process. Outcome is more important than process. Second, which I call the focus shift. The second shift is the power shift. Centrality trumps seniority. And I'll explain what I mean by that. Centrality is more important than seniority. The third is the people shift. Access trumps ownership. Access more important than ownership. And finally, the expectation shift, my favorite, evidence greater than hippo. So remember these 4 things. Outcome trumps process, centrality trumps seniority, access trumps ownership, and evidence trumps hippo. If you are able to live life with these basic 4 principles, about 60-70% of founders' mindset will become very clear to you. So let me go one by one. First thing is outcome trumps process. So typically when you start a program within your legacy organization, you tend to be very process-driven. How long does it take you to justify a program of any order of magnitude, let's say $1 million or more? How long does it take you to get an approval, the business case approved, etc.? Okay, shout out the time frame. 3 months? 6 months? Anybody? 6 months? About 6 months is about right. And then there's a duration of the program when lots of things happen, and you hope that after the duration of the program is done, there is a product or a new way of working or whatever it is that is launched, and you get your money back and you make an ROI. During the duration of the program, the following things happen. So if you look at the dotted lines, the visibility of outcomes to the people who have invested in the program goes as follows. Highly visible at the beginning. So you do a presentation to the steering committee. This is what we're going to do. This is the visibility of the outcomes. And then everything goes quiet. If you're lucky, there is some sort of a midterm review where you get to see how the project is going, how the program is turning up, see a few of the outcomes, and then right at the end. And if you're lucky, the outcomes are good. If you're not lucky, the outcomes are bad. The founder, on the other hand, thinks about outcomes every day and makes those outcomes very visible. Good outcomes, bad outcomes. Successes, failures are made visible on a day-to-day basis. So you know exactly what's happening, whether customers are buying into the idea, whether the feasibility is working out or not, whether the technology is working or not, so that you can make changes on a day-to-day basis. That's why the business value that the founder is creating goes like this. Whereas the traditional idea of business value is you wait for 12 months and then I will create massive value by launching a massive new system or processor, etc. Agility and openness to changes. The founder's mindset is that you are completely open to changes as you go through on a week-to-week basis. Every 2 weeks, you sit down and say, should we continue in this direction? Should we change? Should we continue? Should we change? And only towards the end of the program, you start saying, okay, now let's lock it down. We've made lots of these changes. This is the thing that is working. Let's go with that. But in the traditional leader, you want to lock in those changes right up front. You want to say, let's design it, lock it, and then we will execute. When you're executing, you don't want to see any changes to the plan. So your ability or your agility to make quick changes to the plan reduces very sharply if you're a traditional leader in a traditional context. And finally, risk. In a traditional context, your risk continues to be very high till right at the end of the program when you're launching, whereas the founder says, I'm going to bring my risk really, really down and continue with a low risk as we go forward. So during this whole process, the founder is thinking, I want working prototypes. I'm not going to give a PowerPoint presentation on how we're doing. I'm going to show how my proposition or how my product is working with real customers, with real pain points. If it's working or not working will become very visible to everybody, and we will make changes as we go. That's a very different mindset from a corporate executive mindset that says, I've got the plan. If you follow the plan, everything will be fine, so don't ask me questions for 12 months, and then you come back, and then ta-da, I will open this wonderful package, and you will see a lot of value come out of it. It's a very different mindset. So that's number one. The second is centrality versus seniority. A leader in the current organization sits on top of a hierarchy. Especially in our culture, everybody looks to the leader and says, what do you think? What is the decision? You tell me the decision, then I go and execute. A leader in a founder's mindset sits in the center of the team. In fact, sits in the node of a network. So basically connects the team, the direct team, with the ecosystem, with partners, with vendors, with startups, etc. So your connectivity is where your power comes from as you're a founder. Your position is where your power comes from as a traditional corporate executive. So when you begin to understand that distinction, you will start asking the question, where am I getting my power from? Tomorrow, if I don't have any positional power, will I still have power? Will people still come to me because I'm connecting the dots, I'm sitting in the center of the network, or not? What does my network look like? How often do I connect people? Or do I sit on things and stop people from connecting with each other? How well connected am I to the various departments and divisions within my company? How well connected am I to the ecosystem? How much time am I spending with external startups, with VCs, with universities, etc.? If you're not doing any of that, you're basically sitting in a position of power, and you're drawing all your power from that position. Letting go of that power and holding on to the kind of power that comes from sitting in the center of a network is a very different thing. And there are some people who make that transition quickly, and there are some people I know who will never make that transition in their entire career lifespan. So it's very important to make that shift of where your power comes from. The third is very important, access versus ownership. So today, when you ask a corporate executive, who is in your team? Typically, the answer will mean all the people who report through to me, right? People in my function, in my department, or my division. That's my team. That's how corporate executives understand what a team means. In a founder's mindset, you are not thinking about your team as the people that you own. You are thinking about your team as the people that you can access, or the capabilities even that you can access. So when I think about my team right now, my actual team that I own, that reports through to me, is less than 20 people. Just think about that for a second. Less than 20. The team that is part of my network, the capabilities that I can access, is well over 2,000. So that's the ratio of what I own and what I can access. And that's the reason why in my business, we can do revenues. We are doing revenues today of run rate of $300 million. My core team, my own team, is 20 people. So think about that for a second. How do I manage in a situation where I own a small team, but I have access to thousands of people and hundreds and millions of dollars of revenue? It's a very different way of leading than what most corporate executives are used to. And I have had my own challenges going through it. And this is my favorite one. I'll let you enjoy the cartoon for a second. So option A is where all the evidence is and all the data is. And the hippo says, option B it is. So hippo stands for highest paid person's opinion. All right? And very often, you, are the highest paid person in the room and you give your opinion. Or you are sitting in a room and the highest paid person is the person who takes the decision based on opinion. And very often that opinion is based on what? Prior experience. So if I'm in the shipping industry, I will say, I have seen this for 25 years, and I think we should do this. Or if I'm in the telecommunications industry, I'll say, listen, I've seen 25 years of this movie. This is what we should be doing. Now, in a founder's mindset, when you're trying to disrupt the current and imagine the future, that is exactly the opposite of what you should be doing. But it's very difficult for corporate executives to understand that the worst way of taking decision is figuring out what is the pay level of the person in the room who is taking the decision. The decision has to be based on evidence. And that evidence has to come from the market, from the user. And I was in this situation recently. So we were doing a piece of work, where we are trying to develop a new concept around leadership assessment, etc. And I have been in the industry for 10 years, and I would consider myself a pretty seasoned professional in this industry. A lot of people would acknowledge me as being one of the top executives in the industry. So I have some ego around it. And here is this squad that is working, and I have sponsorship for the squad. And we met in San Francisco in the summer, and we designed something, and we said, let's go and test it. And then recently we met in New York, and I looked at the evidence, and I was shocked. Because the assumptions that I had taken, how people are going to react to what we are putting in front of them, were all wrong. Not all wrong, but mostly wrong. And I had to look at that evidence and go, wait a minute. Am I the hippo in the room? Right? Because all of the evidence is challenging my assumptions, is challenging my opinions. What do I do now? So to cut a long story short, what happened was we decided to stop that experiment. We decided to take the money that we had set aside for that experiment, which was a passion project for me. I'm very passionate about it. And take that money and put it elsewhere. And I have to tell you that in my entire career, that was one of the hardest things for me to do. Not because it was a huge amount of money, but because it was a blow to my ego. And that is what is precisely going to get in the way as you think about corporate innovation. If you believe your past experience is going to help you take those decisions, you're wrong. In fact, your past experience will get in the way of the good decisions. Most ideas that became hugely successful in the world started off looking like stupid ideas. Peter Thiel writes all about this. You take something like Wikipedia. He has this amazing sentence which describes it in a nutshell. He says, Wikipedia was not supposed to work in theory. Think about it. Wikipedia is not supposed to work in theory. It's a stupid idea, but it works in practice. And that is what founder's mindset is all about. Don't think about what's going to work in theory. Think about what's going to work in practice. Withhold judgment, go test, go experiment, get data, and move from there. Easier said than done. And I have been through that journey, and I know how hard it is, because it's a blow to your ego every day. But there are people who enjoy this. All these 4 shifts, there are people with a founder's mindset who wake up in the morning and say, this is why I lead. This is why I enjoy leading. Find those people in your company. I guarantee you that there are people in your company who can think, act, and react like this. They are simply not in the big positions today. So in my previous organization that I worked with, we were doing recruitment, executive recruitment, and one of my partners, search partners, used to say something quite interesting. He said, there's never a lack of talent. We talk about scarcity of talent, right, in the marketplace. There is no scarcity of talent. There is simply a scarcity of our ability to find them. And we have seen this with client after client after client. And you will hear some of those stories later in the day, where we have realized that if you look hard enough and you know where to look, and you're unafraid of bringing talent from lower levels to lead in this context, you will find enough of them inside your company. So we put together a concept of Platform X as an accelerator for corporate innovation, and we have been using this in a number of our clients where we take the management team and we ask them to give innovation themes and pick and support participants. We put squads together with some people who are more senior, who act as co-founders, some people who are other members from other functional areas, and some external experts. And we take them through two journeys. One is a journey of innovation, creating new and different things, working with the ecosystem, building prototypes, testing, learning, etc. And the other is a leadership journey, where you begin to not only shift your mindset, but enjoy the new way of working. You don't come to office thinking, oh my God, I've got to deal with these issues every day. You begin to enjoy and thrive in this new way of working. So as you think about corporate innovation, let me leave you with the following conclusions. One, innovation is happening all around you. You don't need to invent anything. You need to harness the innovation that's out there. Number two, it's not a creativity challenge. It's a political challenge. Number three, your current organization cannot overnight become a startup. You need to work at the edge. You need to create mindfully and thoughtfully an organization that is designed to adapt. Number four, you need to staff that organization with leaders who think like founders. And that is going to be your biggest challenge. But you will find these founders distributed all over your organization, not at the top necessarily, but all over. And your ability to put them in positions where they can make a difference is going to accelerate your innovation agenda. So with that, I'd like to thank all of you for your attention this morning. Thank you.
Much. Now the Q&A sessions, if you'd like to be here for another 30 minutes for Q&A. And the way we do it is, again, back to your mobile phones. Please take it out and open your browser. And could you please lagi? Yes. Silakan kembali masuk ke browser Anda, open your browser, and then type paulleft.com/chias. And there's a column there where you can ask questions. Okay, please, so ask the questions and then press submit. Okay, I think Pak Indra has, sorry, not Indranil, Indro.
Indro,
yes.
Thank you.
So, Pak Indro has already wrapped up the session. So, if you don't mind, can I ask the first question?
Please, go ahead.
Yes. It's very interesting that you propose these edge organizations as a hybrid between mothership and the startup company. But you also mentioned about innovations is not a challenge of creativity, it is a challenge of political challenge, right? So how do you mitigate between the two? You know, creating a hybrid, you propose, but at the same time, it is more political than creativity. So how do you mitigate that? And how can we as big corporations engage in it, or the first step?
So the first answer to that is money. It's simple. It's money. So let me talk to you about how we created 5 edge organizations in Deloitte. So when you create any department or division inside your organization, what do you start with? Can you shout out some? How do you start? You figure out the leader first, okay? Others? You want to start a new venture or new organization or a new something, new division. What do you start with?
A business
proposal,
plan? Yes.
A business plan,
Yep.
a business plan, a proposal, maybe an opportunity document, a feasibility study of what can be done. So you start typically with 2 things, feasibility or viability, right? You start figuring out what is going to be the ROI, et cetera, et cetera. So we've just set up 5 edge organizations, one of which I lead in Deloitte. What do you think we started with? Can you guess? It wasn't a proposal. It wasn't a business plan. No, that was not the first thing. People came quickly after. The first thing was money.
Okay.
The CEO basically said, we're going to do these 5 things. We're going to work on future of work, we're going to work on future of mobility, future of risk, et cetera, et cetera. So we had some discussion about what those themes are. And he says, okay, don't ask me how we're doing this. There is no science to it. I'm going to give $50 million to future of mobility. I'm going to give $50 million to future of work, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay.
So the first act was the CEO saying, here's the money. Once the money is sanctioned, then you go for who's going to lead it. And that's where I came in. And then you get to the point about proposal, business case, et cetera, et cetera. So the way to beat the politics behind this is to set aside the money first. That is number one. Number two is, before you build a plan, bring in the leader. Make sure that the leadership team is the one that is creating the plan. So who first, then what?
Okay.
First, how much?
Right. And then the leader.
Then who?
Okay.
Then what?
So proposal is the third, the last one.
Correct. The proposal is the last one. So then what happens is that the money is already set aside. So a lot of the politics, this is Sun Tzu, Art of War, basically, right? So how do you beat the politics? So the money is not coming from anybody's P&L anymore. It has been set aside, right? So nobody has a veto power on the money.
Right.
Nobody can judge the plan to say whether the plan is good or bad, etc. I mean, they can, but you create a separate committee for that. So the fourth thing is you create an investment committee. So the investment committee is made up of people who are senior enough to keep an eye on the spend, but who are, the committee itself is small enough so that they can debate and disagree and decide.
Right.
So it's not a large, it's not the entire board. So my investment committee is 3 people. Myself, there's a leader from the United States, and there's a leader from Canada. And 3 of us come together. We have very, very difficult conversations.
Right.
Because there's a lot of money and the decisions to be made. May not be kosher in here, but we always end our meetings with drinks because we have to make up because we fight a lot.
Right.
But it's important to break the politics by keeping the team small enough and putting people who have the ability to take decisions and move forward, but set aside the money first.
Right. So money always talks louder.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. That's the one thing that I've come to realize, that money talks, everything else
follows. Right. So applause for Pa Indro. So I think that answered the first questions, right? Or do you want to add? There are 10 people vote for this question. So this is like the most.
So how can you collaborate between business and politics and innovation? So that's one way to do it, right? So, but basically you have to be aware of it. You have to work on the governance first. So the money, the governance, how you're going to spend that money, and then who is going to, who is going to, build the machine, and then how are you going to spend the money and make sure that you have the right team. So that's pretty much how it goes. But on an ongoing basis, your management committee will continue to see. The outcomes have to be very visible. So there is no hiding of how we are doing, what is happening, so you deal with the immune system on an ongoing basis. But you keep this organization somewhat to the side. You don't take the current P&L and use that money to fund this organization. It's funded from a different pot with different risk expectations, etc. So that's how you deal with it. It's not an exact science. There are difficulties every day as we go through this. Every organization has that. And the difficulty is that if you separate too much, then this organization drifts away and does its own thing. If you bring it too far in, then clash starts to happen. So the concept of edge is just being able to sit side by side with the current organization. So in my case, I have a fascinating situation where I have 50% of my time that I spend on the edge organization, 50% of my time that I spend in the traditional organization. But that's a very special case. I have a very high tolerance for pain. So that's why I do that. But usually, what is a good idea is to have clear separation. All right, so
Yes.
how to make our boss believe customers and users is the first priority.
7 votes.
Wow. So, first of all, if your boss does not believe that customers and users is first priority, you need to start taking out your CV, I think. But jokes aside, I think what happens is, so all of you understand this concept of empathy, right? So we hear a lot about user empathy, customer empathy, living in the shoes of the customer, spending time with the customer, understanding the challenges of the user, et cetera, et cetera. So I personally believe that all of us in our career start off with a fairly high degree of empathy. Why? Because we start on the field. Most of us, unless you're born into a very rich family and you're CEO from day one. But most of us start on the field. We are working directly with customers, probably selling, sales, or manufacturing, or whatever. We're interacting with users all the time. And then slowly we get a corner office, air-conditioned, somewhere in the city, away from the field, and we start to get detached from the user, from the customer, right? So what I would suggest to you is, rather than make a judgment that something is wrong with your boss, that he or she is just not tuned into the user and the customer, understand this, that over time, bureaucracy takes over. You have so many reports to write or review, you have so many meetings to attend, that you stop spending time with users and customers. So one of my best examples of this is basically what Lego did. What Lego did was very interesting. So there's a book called Small Data. If you can get hold of that book, read it. It basically asked all their senior executives, your boss included, people at that level, to go spend a week in the house, in the family of a user. So they went to the inner city neighborhoods in Paris, the inner city neighborhoods in Stockholm, etc., and they lived with a family with young children who were users of Lego, etc., and adolescents and teenagers. And it struck them that their strategy of making these Lego blocks bigger and easier to play with, you remember that they had gone through that strategy to make them bigger and easier?
Yep.
So they actually realized that that was the wrong strategy. And they realized because they saw kids, young kids, taking immense pride in being able to be the only kid in the neighborhood who could do some impossible tricks with their skateboard. So there is actually, if you go to the Lego office, they have this picture, or I think it's the item, of a kid's sneakers, which is completely gone. I mean, the heels are completely gone. And they use that sneaker to describe why this child, the 12-year-old kid, was so proud of that old sneakers, would never buy new sneakers. Mm-hmm. You know why? Because that was proof that he was the best skateboarder in his neighborhood. So that helped switch Lego's strategy to make the blocks smaller and more difficult to play with.
Right, okay.
Right? So it comes from understanding the user directly, not with a presentation on user expectations and research and numbers and all of that, but to spend time with the user. So the next time, incentivize your boss to go spend some time with the user. Go with him or her. Spend time. And when I say spend time, I don't mean like, go to a posh, restaurant or, a big event hall like this in a conference. I mean in their environment, when they're going to work, in their family, if possible. So I've got a very close friend of mine who was with Procter & Gamble, and he was selling baby diapers. Basically, he was the brand person for baby diapers. And he didn't have kids. So Procter & Gamble made him spend an entire month with a family with a young child where he had to change diapers every day. He was basically, the family outsourced diaper changing to him.
Right.
And he came back with some of the best insights on design, on all of the aspects of what a baby diaper should look like.
Right.
So that is the key. You have to enjoy it. You have to see that not as, oh, another thing to do. But this is why we come to work. This is why we innovate.
So it's back to founder's mindset on your presentations.
Back
right?
to founder's
Evidence
mindset.
trump hippo.
Yes,
Right.
evidence trumps hippo.
Right.
That is the key. But you have to explain to your boss why it's fun as well to spend time with the customer. And as you do that, and the more he or she enjoys it, this will become a non-issue.
Right. Okay. Could you please share your most challenging experience in
In
helping
helping
companies?
company in
Yes.
the innovation journey, how
Yeah.
would it finally? It doesn't end. It does not end. That is one of the realizations that I've had. Any consultant who comes to you and says, we will create an end state document, is lying to you. There is no end state in this game. Right?
So, consultants in the room, be aware.
There is no end state.
Right.
So, most challenging experience for me has not been, so let me just say this, has never been with users or customers, has never been with my technology people that I access or the collaborators or the partners that I work with. It's never a user problem. It's never a technology or a feasibility problem. It's not a theoretical problem. Most of the challenges are political challenges. And they're political challenges. You have to understand that Deloitte is a partnership firm. So we are we're equal partners. I am not the boss of another partner, and that partner is not my boss. In fact, the CEO reports to us. We are the shareholders. So it's a different dynamic within Deloitte. So when you are with equal partners, whose decision counts? How do you know? So that is often the political challenge that you deal with. But one of the things that I've come to realize is that about myself is that I am okay with that. I deal with that quite well. Where I find challenge is when my team struggles with it. And how do I get my team to know that it's okay, that this is what progress looks like. This is what innovation feels like. It's 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And that's okay, because a lot of my team feels that even when we are being wildly successful, we are being not very successful, because there are always setbacks. There are setbacks every day, every week. It's never a perfect picture. So that's my biggest challenge. How do I get my team to see it the way I see it? And to stay calm and be happy and be excited about what we're doing, and not to focus on the challenges, the daily challenges of operating in this environment.
Excellent. So the third question is, how do you deal with resistance from employees when implementing innovation?
Yes. So I talked about the immune system. So, so most of us, when we are confronted by the immune system, when the immune system challenges you, right, in terms of what you're doing in innovation, what is the typical reaction that you would have to that? How would you deal with it on a day-to-day basis? So suppose somebody comes and challenges you, why are you spending this money? Why are you doing this? Why are you doing an experiment, etc.? How would you deal with that? Shout out an answer. Explain. Thank you. And that is the exact wrong way to deal with the immune system. That is the exact wrong way to deal with the immune system. Explaining and trying to give rationale and logic. Because if you try to do that, you will spend a lot of time providing more information and more data and not changing their mind at all. So one of my best philosophers, one of the philosophers and economists that I read a lot is a guy called Roland Coase, C-O-A-S-E. He predicted, I think, 50 years ago, what's happening in Silicon Valley right now, a Nobel Prize winning economist. If you ever get a chance, read Ronald Coase. And Ronald Coase used to say that if you torture data long enough, it will confess to anything.
Right.
So your immune system are masters at taking your data and then not changing their minds and not being convinced with what you're saying. So please, before your business model is ready for prime time, before your product is growing at 100% a day, don't explain what you are doing.
Okay.
Right? Don't try to ask for resources because you have to explain when you ask for resources.
Right.
So the idea is to bootstrap at the early stages, to use very little resources. In fact, one of the things that I did in my first 3 months, and my colleague Ruxana is here, and she knows well this whole story. A lot of people used to come and tell me, hey, you've got this whole funding thing. What are you doing with it? And it's very exciting. Can I come and see what you're doing? And I used to say to them, to all of them, nothing. We're not doing anything. Just kind of thinking about stuff. No, not really. And then finance would come to me and say, hey, you've got all of this money in the bank. When are you going to spend it? I said, no, not interested. Not right now. We don't know what to spend it on. So the first step is to make sure that the immune system ignores you.
Right. Now that's
So
interesting.
that is the first step. Make sure that they ignore you. The second step is harder, which is once you start to do something and people get to know, oh, hey, yeah, this is going on and this interesting innovation is happening, et cetera, you will realize that your results are not yet there. So you're spending money, no results, no revenue. That's when they will make fun of you. And that's very hard. Because second step, you're into the second step when they start making fun of you. So this is what it looks like. So people would go into meeting rooms when I'm not there, and they would say, oh, this Indro, he had such a fantastic career. He's been a CEO, and look at him right now. He's doing this impossible task, no revenues. It's so small. It doesn't work. I wish he had better sense, and he managed his career better. That's what you're going to hear, because they're going to make fun of you. And you've got to keep your ego in check, because this is step 2. Step 3 is when they start getting interested in you.
Right.
So once you've started showing some revenue, you've started some user base, some hits are happening, a little bit of noise in the organization that, oh, maybe something is moving. Then they start coming to you and saying, hey, I'm interested. Can you show me? So they start getting interested. And that is always a warning sign, because if they are interested and then they start coming to you, your natural thing is, see, I told you this is going to be successful. And you've got to keep it in check. Don't disclose, even at that stage. Because once they get interested, that's when they're going to fight you. That's when the immune system attacks. When they show interest and they say, okay, now that I understand what you're doing, now that we've seen early results, now let's make a business plan.
Right.
Now let's think about resourcing and a business plan and setting up a proper organization. And at that stage, I say to them, thank you, but no thank you. Thank you, but no thank you. Because I do not want to deal with that. I will continue doing what I'm doing. Then finally, the final stage after they start fighting you is that they want to come and join you. That's when you open the door. Only when they want to leave their current job and then join you. Not show interest without leaving their current position. Only when you see a CFO who says, I'm going to drop what I'm doing, and I'm going to come and join you in your team. That is when you know that they're committed. That's when you open the door. You don't fight the resistance. It's useless. Most companies, if you fight the immune system, you will lose. No matter how much authority you are given by the CEO, I don't care. You will probably not have half as much authority as I have from the CEO, but if I fought the immune system at Deloitte, I would lose.
But what if what you do is process innovations, where it is implemented within the mothership organizations, so involve everybody, exposed to everybody, so you cannot escape and you cannot sort of like setting up a new organizations because, see, it's in the mothership. How do you deal with the resistance?
So we are working on process innovation as well internally. So the way we do it is basically bring the process out.
Okay,
Prototype it.
First. Okay.
Do it in a very small pilot somewhere in a remote location away from the headquarters, right? And then make sure that it works and then bring it back. So let's take Johnson & Johnson, for example. A lot of the innovations that they are doing around their organization, HR process, et cetera, et cetera. Johnson & Johnson is headquartered in the United States, in New Brunswick. A lot of the innovations that are being piloted in Nigeria, in Indonesia, in China, etc. So by the time it goes back to New Brunswick, you can show that it actually works.
Evidence,
so you pull the process out to the remotest place from headquarters, and then you test and you iterate and you learn and then bring it back.
Excellent. Okay, next question is, how do we measure the success of innovation throughout organization?
How do we measure the success of innovation for our organization? Measurement is very important. And I have spent a lot of time kind of thinking about this. So innovation, especially disruptive innovation, goes through you have to think in terms of three phases, right? So it's desirability, feasibility, viability. So typically when you're putting forward a thesis in terms of spending some money on innovation, if you are a large company, if you're like any of my clients, which one do you think is the one which is picked up first? Desirability, feasibility, viability. Desirability is defined as how desirable is your idea to customers, right? Feasibility is it technically feasible to build or put together the solution that you're thinking of? And viability is, will it make money? Is it economically going to be viable? So most business cases are built on what? Viability, right? So when you're thinking about innovation, just remember this step-by-step process. In sprint one, in phase one, you don't test for feasibility or viability. You test for desirability. Only if you can prove that what you are trying to sell is desired by the customer, not satisfactory. You have to prove that if your product is like this, then customers are coming and snatching that product away from your hands. That's how desirable it is. It's not that when you do a customer satisfaction survey, 50% said, yeah, that's great, 50% said, oh, okay. No. It's about like 100% going crazy about it. Only if you can prove that for a small number of customers, you go to feasibility. Then you say, okay, can I build this thing at scale? Can I manufacture it? Can I configure it? Do I have the technology, et cetera, et cetera? So that is your next test. Is it feasible? Can we do it at scale? Not just one or two prototypes. The third stage is, can I make money? Can I monetize the ecosystem? A lot of the innovations that we're looking at today are fairly complicated, can be monetized in a few different ways. Right. So can it be monetized? Can we make money off it? So the idea is, when you're testing desirability, don't spend too much money. Because if it's not desirable, then you can say, okay, didn't work, move on. Then put some more money when you're testing feasibility, and ask for the big money when you know that it's viable. So that's the way to think about it, not in the other way around. And if you go to viability too quickly before testing desirability and feasibility, you will fall into the trap that many large corporations fall in. They fall in love with their product, right? They fall in love with their product. I keep saying, don't fall in love with the product, fall in love with the user. Not literally, but, really engage with what the user is looking for. Because most products will undergo many different changes before they become truly viable. So if you think about the app Angry Birds, which became a massive hit, I wasted many, many evenings on Angry Birds. So that was, I think, the 42nd or the 43rd version of that app that actually took off.
Right.
If you look at the history of Airbnb, if you look at the history of Uber, the business model that is actually working right now was probably version 5, 6, or 7. VCs will tell you all the time that if I come to them with a startup, and if that startup has not tried and failed at least 2 or 3 times, they don't put money in it. So you will go through that desirability, feasibility cycle a few times, and then ask for the big money.
Right, so we only have 1
2
more.
minutes.
Yeah,
Okay.
2 minutes. So one quick answer for these last questions. Is there any practical way to simply know that a leader has founder's mindset?
Just ask Deloitte.
Okay.
So no, the practical way of understanding who has founder mindset and who doesn't have, it's basically you have to understand a bit of psychology. You have to understand the person's, some call it personality traits or personal traits, and there are some markers, certain markers of those personality traits that you need to observe and understand. So as I said, it's not a skill set issue. It's not a competency issue. It's a persona issue. Mm-hmm. How much ego does this person have? How does this person come across interpersonally? How does this person engage with other people? Does this person have empathy? Is he or she able to be bold without being very clear exactly how it's going to pan out? Will this person take a career risk and be able to say, listen, if it doesn't work out, I take accountability? Or will he or she be pointing fingers at somebody else? Is this person okay with conflict? When he or she gets into a fight with somebody else, can he or she come out of it and still be friends with that person? Right? So all of those things are personality type traits that you can, and there are some markers that we have looked at in our research that you can identify and observe. So actually, it's not that hard, frankly, to look at the people. And as I'm giving you the markers, I'm sure you're thinking of people inside your company, and you know pretty much, if you've seen them over a period of time, you can make a judgment, make a reasonable judgment. Having said that, when they're actually put in the real environment, some of them may still struggle, and so they will need help. So they typically need some coaching as they go through this, because it's not just what you start with, it's about helping you continue to think and act like founders.
Thank you very much. Warm of applause for Pak Indro. And we have a token of appreciation for you. This is from everybody in the room. Pak Indro.
Oh, wow.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's a picture.
Very nice.
We should take this out. Yep.